Hello everyone, Eric the Racket Scientist here. I have another quick video for you today, and I know I've been doing a lot of videos back to back because those were the rackets that I bought for myself over the holidays, and special thanks and shout out to the individuals who helped me obtain those rackets. This one in particular, what I have for you today, is a Gosen Inferno Smart. And this one was brought to me by a friend who was traveling in Japan and found this racket at Shuttle House, which is a shop in Tokyo that I have ordered internationally from before. They have a really good selection of stuff. Their website can be a little, how to say, the stock doesn't, they don't keep it updated that well, but they have a lot of stuff on there, and they even have leaning products, which is a little unusual for a Japanese shop. And apparently they do respond pretty readily to emails and communication and stuff. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. And again, this is probably going to be a pretty quick video. As you can see, this handle here comes without an undergrip and is shrink wrapped, so that means we won't have to remove an undergrip for this one. But before I do that, as I'm unwrapping this, I'm just going to talk a little bit about these rackets. Now, unless you are familiar, unless you've seen these rackets before or are familiar with Gosen products, then you most likely have not seen anything like this before. And if you are looking closely at the racket, then you will notice that the frame is really odd. And I will put my other racket, and this is not a new racket. This is a racket that I've already owned. And so you can kind of look at that and figure that out while I unwrap this other one here. But to describe what you're seeing, essentially, the frame of these rackets are wavy. Okay, now I think a lot of you have probably seen sword frame rackets before, like Brave Sword, some of the Jet Speed, Aura Speed, whatever, Nano Flare, not quite sword frame. And when I say sword frame, I'm referring to this sharp frame, right? That's kind of blade-like, as in it comes to a point. So Nano Flare isn't really a true sword frame because it's still a little rounded at the edge, but it is a speed frame. And so sword frame refers to the sharp edge, and there are several rackets that have that around the rim. Now, where this racket differs, as you can see, this one is wavy. Okay. Now that's a unique feature of these Gosen Inferno rackets, and there are several different models. Off the top of my head, I can think of the two that I have here. This is a Gosen Inferno EX. Where's the model name? EX. And the black one is the Gosen Inferno Smart. Here we go. There's also a Gosen Inferno Raid. That one is also red. And I believe it doesn't have this flame pattern. It looks very similar. Actually, a good friend of mine has the Raid version. And there's also a white one, which is, I'm going to look this up because I don't want to get this wrong. Oh, right. It's called the Gosen Inferno Air. And the Gosen Inferno Air model is a 5U model, and that's why it's called Air, because, you know, it's supposed to be light or whatever. The Gosen Inferno Smart is a 4U. We can see here it says 82 grams is supposed to be the target. One cool thing about these Gosen rackets is that they put their racket specs, let's see if that will come into focus, barely, maybe a little less. Okay, cool. They put all their racket specs on the shaft, so you can see that it also says tension max 32 pounds, which is pretty good. And it has a head weight scale, and so this one is slight head heavy, as you can see. And in terms of flexibility, medium stiff. So just to recap, that's 4UG5 at 82 grams, slight head heavy, and medium stiff. So that seems like a formula that's quite easy to use. And then my Inferno EX is a 3U at 86 grams, 32 pounds tension. Again, we see that it's a little more head heavy. So it's just normal head heavy, not extreme head heavy, not slight, but normal head heavy, and slightly stiff. Okay. And the Inferno Air is going to be 5U, and it's going to be more on the flexible side. It's going to be flexible, and it's going to be slightly headlight. And if I can find the product sheet for that, I'm going to go, put that on. I'm going to put that on the video. And in addition, there's the Inferno Raid that I mentioned, which I don't have right now, but my friend has, and that one is a matte red. So actually, that would be the counterpart to the Inferno Smart, and that racket is matte red, and it's 3U. It's supposed to be a stiff, flexible racket and head heavy. So basically, this Inferno EX is similar, but it's going to be a little bit more flexible than the Raid. So if I get a chance, I would like to test all three side by side. I probably will be able to get that chance. So we will visit that opportunity when it comes, when we get to it. So just visually having these side by side, it seems like they have very similar shapes. I don't immediately see any differences in the head frame, shaft length. Although something interesting I just noticed, actually, I take back what I said about the Smart, because it actually has G6 printed here at the bottom of the shaft next to the serial number. So I guess this is supposed to be a G6 size grip, which doesn't quite feel like it, if I'm being honest. And I think that might be due to the shrink wrap over the handle. But either way, that's it is what it is. And so my friend picked this up, and well, I picked this up because my friend was at Shuttle House and he messaged me, and I actually had my eye on this racket because I'm a huge fan of this Inferno EX. I originally bought this racket because I walked into my local shop one day and they had this racket, and it was so odd that I had to buy it instantly. And it turned out to be a really good one, and I think honestly one of my most sleeper picks. It's just a shame that these Gosen rackets are so difficult to come by in North America, because they're really good rackets, they're really fun and unique. And so I walked into the shop and I said, whoa, that is a crazy looking racket, and I have to have it. So I just bought it there on the spot. And, I do that for a lot of rackets actually, and that's part of how I ended up with such a large collection. So for those of you who don't know, I have a lot of rackets, and that's kind of why I brand myself as a racket scientist. And yeah, I liked it a lot, and that was a few years ago, and so I thought, okay, maybe I should try another type of Inferno racket too, just because I like it that much. And so here I am. I thought, okay, well, because my friend has the other 3U model, the Inferno Raid, which also is a 3U head heavy, and this one, the Inferno EX, is also a 3U head heavy. Why don't I get something a little different? And so I thought, okay, so the next step down is Inferno Smart, which is a 4U slight head heavy. So here I am. I found the Inferno Smart. Well, okay, so my other friend was in Taiwan at the time, near the holidays. And he was going to this one shop where I saw they had the Inferno Smart in stock. So I asked him, hey, if you see this racket, could you go ahead and pick it up? And he said, yeah, sure. And it turns out the shop did not actually have the racket in stock, which was fine. But my other friend happened to be in Tokyo at the time at Shuttle House, and he asked me, because he knows that I know about rackets. He was like, hey, are there any unique or interesting rackets I should look out for? And I said, oh, so if you're in Japan, well, aside from the obvious JP Code Yonex rackets, you should look out for Mizuno, because Mizuno is not as common to get in North America, although it is becoming more common. Either Mizuno, or if you can find a Gosen racket, because Gosen is really quite difficult to come by in North America, and even in Taiwan or Japan can be a little difficult. I was told by the shop owner, Ian at Pro Racket Sports, whom I've known for a long time, that in terms of Gosen, their production runs are very inconsistent and sporadic, and so it's difficult to consistently obtain Gosen products to keep them in stock. So I told him that, and without even asking him which model to look for, my friend in Tokyo sent me a picture of this rack, and he's like, wow, this thing looks really cool. And I was like, oh, that's actually the racket that I had my eye on. Would you mind buying that for me? And he's like, yeah, sure, I can do that. And he got back kind of recently, and he handed this racket off to me, and here we are. Yeah, and this really is a really good looking racket. This matte black. The camera really doesn't do it justice because you can't really see the light reflecting off of it, but it's a very mature design. You can see that there's some waves here on the shaft as well. The thing I like about Mizuno and Gosen rackets is that, yeah, the design of those rackets are very mature, especially compared to the Victor and Yonex ones, and so it almost feels like very cool and mysterious. If you walk on with one of these rackets and people are like, "Oh my God, like what do you have there? That's crazy," and you're like, "Yeah, it is crazy." And that being said, as from what I've said, you might think that Gosen rackets are pretty expensive if they don't have consistent production runs and stuff, and that's not really the case. I think my friend that got this from Japan got it for was it definitely less than $140, and this is a top of the line racket, so really you're getting a lot for your money if you can find Mizuno or Gosen rackets in Taiwan or Japan. These are manufactured in Taiwan, by the way. It says so on the shaft. But if you watch enough of these videos, you'll know that the build quality, the craftsmanship of Mizuno rackets is, in my mind, top notch. And I feel the same way about Gosen rackets. Again, Taiwanese manufacturing is very good. And well, both companies are Japan based, so I think they're designed in Japan, and you could say the same for Redsen, but Redsen and Gosen both manufacture in Taiwan, whereas Mizuno manufactures in, I think, China for their mid-range, lower range rackets. Maybe Taiwan too, but their higher range rackets, I think, are manufactured in Japan, whereas Gosen and Redsen even share a couple factories. You can actually see this. There was one previous Gosen racket I owned that had that if you looked closely, you could tell it shared a similar mold to one of the Redsen rackets I had. And I don't quite remember off the top of my head what those models are because, yeah, it was just like a weird random racket that I had. If I remember, I might put it in the description of the video or something. And it's worth noting that this Inferno line is, I wouldn't say quite last generation because they're still selling them, and I suspect that these Inferno rackets are still being manufactured. But they Gosen has come out with a new line of rackets using the same mold, so they still have the wavy frame, and they're called Cocutus, which I believe is a reference to, well, let me double check this here. Okay, so just got back from Googling this on my laptop, but Cocutus, if I'm pronouncing that even correctly, is in Greek mythology one of the rivers of the underworld. And so kind of keeping up with their theme of the waviness, Gosen has opted to name that other series of wavy rackets Cocutus. I guess in a reference to the waviness of the racket. So that's kind of interesting. It's interesting indeed. Sorry I'm doing this off camera, but I'm just redoing part of this grip because I overran the track length of this grip because it is a G6 shrink wrapped grip, so it's a combination that I don't encounter that often. I think most of the pre-shrink wrapped handles that I deal with have been in G5. And like I appreciate it. Ideally like every grip that I do would be shrink wrapped, and that would just be cool, but like not a lot of companies do that. It's just Redsen and Gosen have been so far the only companies that I've found that consistently do this with their rackets. I know that if you buy in Taiwan or Japan, you can actually find Victor rackets, for example, like a Ryuga 2 Pro, right? You can find them without any undergrip applied. So it's just going to be the bare free core handle. And that's nice because, you know, you don't have to spend the time cleaning it off. But for some reason in North America specifically, you really don't find that a lot. Yeah, and the one downside to the shrink wrapped handles, which I may have mentioned in the previous video where we had one of those, is that you get this little ridge here at the bottom of the cone because the shrink wrap goes across the wooden handle, and then it's got to overlap with the cone because otherwise it doesn't seal completely. But then you end up getting this little ridge here, okay, which, you know, some people hate. I think you just got to get used to it. Once you get used to it, it's nice because you can use it as a reference for where to place your fingers when you're manipulating the racket at the higher end. But, you know, it can also be a little disorienting, and I understand that. So you can actually see it pretty clearly here now. And based on the handle of the Inferno EX, this is a handle that didn't have that. So this was not a shrink wrapped. I think this was just a plain wooden handle. Holding them side by side, I can't actually tell that this is a G6, at least by Gosen. And that's the thing, right? It's like the annoying thing about grip sizes is that whatever the grip size is can vary between the different brands. I know for Redson in particular, the G5 tends to be a little bit bigger than average. And here that feels like the case, right? So the Gosen G5 grip, it feels a little on the larger side, where the G6 feels a little closer to what I would expect. So in order to even out the two, the next time I would grip this, I would probably put maybe a little more cushion wrap, but it's not that big of a deal. I only really care about the finesse of the grip when it comes to my tournament rackets. And because I only have one of these, each of these are not rackets that I would typically use in tournament. Although I say that, but I have used the Inferno EX in tournament matches in mixed doubles, and I really like it for that. It's got a lot of qualities that make it good for mixed doubles in my mind. It does say it's head heavy slightly, but it's a relatively balanced racket at the end of the day, and it swings quickly because of the sword frame. It cuts through the air, and which means backhands are very easy to time, which is very important for me in mixed doubles. And it supports fast attacking. And again, the balanced nature makes it easy to maneuver and direct shots. Oh, yes. I should talk about why this racket is wavy. I didn't mention that at all. So Gosen claims that normal sword rackets, like the Brave sword rackets back in the day, were pretty fragile, just because well, you might think that a sharp frame could be strong at the point, and you might be right. But if you know anything about physics, you'll know that a parabolic structure, or like a semicircle structure, is stronger. And so a typical oval frame from Yonex, oval profile frame from Yonex, or like rounded box, will actually be a stronger frame than a normal sword frame. And people have varying opinions on the durability of Brave swords. I don't think anyone has necessarily gone around smashing them consistently to see. I myself have broken 4 of them in the past, although that was when I was younger. And I've heard anecdotes of people breaking Brave swords quite easily, even not clashing, just like hitting the bird on the rim. Now, the point of the waviness that Gosen claims is partially to increase rigidity and durability. They claim that these waves kind of add some enforcement to the structural integrity of the racket in some way, so that if it's hit on the edge or being pushed on from the side under tension, then it will be able to resist breakage more easily. Now, I don't know if that's true, and I'm not going to go ahead and test that because I don't like breaking rackets for no reason. But I do think it's interesting, and at the very least, it's very visually interesting. And I will say that it swings just as fast as a sword racket. This wavy frame doesn't really give us any of a speed penalty when swinging the racket. The one thing I will say though is that manufacturing this racket must be quite a bit more tough because, as you can imagine, the mold for this racket must be very complex and not very much of a tolerance for any defects, right? So if you just have an oval mold or sword mold, then it's the same all around. It'd be easy to get the carbon fiber to shape properly. Then you have something like this where it could very easily come apart if you're not careful or if you don't follow the manufacturing process correctly. So it's very surprising to me that these rackets are the value that they are, where you can, if you get them in Taiwan or Japan, you can get them below $150, and they are excellent rackets. So let's just remember that part. So that's all I have for you today. Pretty short video, but the TLDR, if you see one of these rackets, if you see a Gosen racket and you're interested in exotic or rare rackets, then would highly recommend you taking the opportunity to pick one up because they are very interesting and they're pretty good rackets too. I don't like using the term good or bad necessarily because it's always subjective, but I do think that they have good manufacturing and quality control. It has an interesting design, and if it suits your play style, it's a racket that will respond very well, or any of the Inferno rackets. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.